Hey guys, welcome back to BGA. Today I want to take a minute to talk about Xbox. Now I don't think I've covered Xbox much over the course of this show, so I think now is as good a time as any to start. Xbox has really been on the decline since 2013, and while a lot of Xbox fanboys would be quick to disagree with me on that point, I think it really does show in their sales, in the quality of their games, in basically everything, how Xbox is really on the downhill. And nothing has really shown that better than the fact that they've stopped having console exclusives. Now, Xbox fans will be quick to say that console exclusives are a generally bad thing. It stops a lot of consumers from playing certain games. They would argue that everybody should be able to play something like God of War. But console exclusives, historically and still now, are the main thing driving a lot of gamers to go from one platform to the other. While a lot of the gaming player base might be more focused on FIFA or GTA or just Fortnite, the harder core audience will be picking a console based on the quality of the games that console manufacturer is putting out, as everything else is about the same across the consoles. Of course, Xbox in recent years has even stopped having that, as their decision to put out the Xbox Series S, a significantly less powerful console than the Series X or the comparable PS5, has sort of left them in the dust a bit. Not in terms of not getting every game, but there are certain games that they just haven't gotten or haven't gotten on time. Baldur's Gate 3 is the example that comes to mind for me of it being promised to release on every platform, but instead getting delayed and hindered specifically because of Xbox and the limitations of the Series S. In fact, if I recall correctly, the Series S is in some ways even less powerful than the Xbox One X, which is insane because, 8th gen refresh console versus a 9th gen console. I think you want to, even if it's really similar in power, you kind of want that power increase to still go up rather than down. But anyway, Xbox has also been pushing for the longest time now Game Pass, which is essentially a subscription service where you get all of Xbox's games day and date, and you get basically everything they release for one single subscription a month. And well, I have to be honest, it hasn't really had that much value when I've had it, and that might just be me. I'm not saying that Xbox in its entirety and Microsoft putting out their games on this service is a bad thing, or even a bad deal, because it most certainly isn't. Now, as prices continue to increase, which they absolutely have, that deal becomes slimmer and slimmer. But for me, at least, the quality of the games and the variety of games offered on this service isn't enticing enough, sadly. And so whenever I have this service, I end up not really using it that much. There is a comparable PlayStation option in PS Plus Premium or PS Plus Extra, but I feel basically about the same as that. I don't think I would ever get the use out of it. The difference between these two services, though, is that with Game Pass, their games come out day and date, and Microsoft has pivoted their entire business strategy to be based solely around the propagation of Xbox Game Pass to as many players as possible. Meanwhile, Sony has kept their mantra focused on releasing standalone games for $60 or $70, where they will then be given quite a bit more money for one-time purchases rather than a subscription. So, obviously, subscriptions can make a lot of money, and Microsoft has seen quite a bit of money made from Xbox Game Pass. The problem that Game Pass has run into in recent years, specifically after the end of COVID, is that it just can't grow anymore. Now, a lot of companies have a mantra of infinite growth. They want year-over-year increase in profits, increase in consumer base, stuff like that, and Microsoft, being a trillion-dollar company, is at the forefront of this philosophy. The problem is Xbox isn't infinitely growable. No console really is, but Xbox especially. Microsoft, as a massive megacorporation that dwarfs Sony or Nintendo, has always struggled to create games of the same caliber as the other two because they simply don't understand what makes video games good and how to develop video games. So while you might have a couple of gems come out of Microsoft over the years, you will not get that to the same caliber as what Nintendo and Sony constantly put out year after year. So, when you get to Game Pass, and then you have PS Plus Extra, and their base of third-party games is roughly about the same, and you are then looking at the first-party games for what service you would want to do. Well, what does Xbox have? It has Starfield. It has Halo, which a lot of people like Halo. I despise Halo, but, you know, it could do whatever, honestly. But people will play it no matter what. And the thing is, despite the fact that Microsoft has a library of games, a lot of which they have bought and which already exist on the PlayStation anyway, they don't exactly have something to entice people to buy an Xbox. Let's take the acquisition of Activision, for example. This was an extremely expensive purchase, billions and billions of dollars, an unfathomable amount of money in video game acquisitions. And what exactly has Microsoft gained from that? Well, they've gained Call of Duty, and more importantly, they've gained King. Because, frankly, what Microsoft has shown is they're not really interested as much in the console market anymore, but in the mobile market. But we'll focus more on the Activision side for now. What do they get with that? Well, they get Call of Duty, and they get Blizzard, basically, and then they get like a dozen dead IPs that Activision wasn't even going to do anything with, and Microsoft will continue not to do anything with. So, if we're looking at what Microsoft is doing now with the remnants of Activision, well, they're just still putting the games out on every platform. Except, the difference is now, they come out on Game Pass. So what has actually happened now is because everybody on Xbox has Game Pass and Microsoft has pushed everybody to Game Pass on their own platform, and now they have bought up a third-party publisher that didn't put all of their games on Game Pass, and now has put those games on Game Pass, they're actually getting less money because their subscriber base isn't growing from the fact that Call of Duty is now available on Game Pass. Everybody who was playing Call of Duty on Xbox already had Game Pass because you need Game Pass to play online on Xbox. So Microsoft has now reached an impasse. They don't have a player base to grow on their own console anymore, and what we're seeing is a much slower and honestly less dramatic version of what happened to Sega at the end of the 20th century. Microsoft is slowly decaying. Sega kind of crashed and burned because of multiple poor business choices, but Microsoft has a slow decay. They've started to put their games on PlayStation now. They've started to market their games more as third-party. It's safe to say that Microsoft is a third-party publisher at this point, with a remnant of a console left. It's almost like if Sega started releasing games on the GameCube and PS2, but then also kept the Dreamcast around for support for a couple more years. It's just kind of sad, honestly, to watch this happen. But, I mean, hey, being able to play Gears of War and Forza Horizon 5 on the PS5 certainly is something I never thought I'd see. But is it really good? Honestly, I don't know. It's hard to tell because the Xbox has been sort of a dead console for a long time. People just didn't want to admit it. As more and more Microsoft games get announced that they're coming to the PS5, I think the Xbox nationalism that has always existed, that drove the resurgence of the console wars around 2020 and the release of the 9th gen, has now finally died almost permanently, because you can no longer have this denial about where Microsoft is heading with the future of Xbox. The Xbox console brand is basically dead at this point. Microsoft clearly doesn't care about it, and neither should the consumer. All of their games are going to, at least within 6 months to a year, are going to appear on a PlayStation 5, so why even have an Xbox? Why have a whole separate machine to play honestly mediocre games 6 months early? I mean, imagine if Oblivion Remastered was exclusive to Game Pass. Cool, people can talk about Oblivion and reminisce all they want, but that game is still garbage. Are people who've never played Oblivion really going to care if a glitchy, less interesting version of Skyrim basically comes out and that's your one thing that's released for Game Pass that year? All in all, I think there is a future for Microsoft in the video game industry, and I sincerely hope there is, seeing as they now own probably about 33% of beloved IPs through their purchase of Activision and Bethesda. If they stopped making games, if they stopped doing anything related to gaming and basically abandoned the medium altogether, that would be a tremendous loss of culture and history for the industry that I do not want to happen under any circumstances, because frankly, I think it would be better if at least some company had the prospect of doing something with a brand rather than Microsoft just hoarding a bunch of IPs and then never ever using them. But what do you think? Tell me in the comments below if you think Xbox is really going down this route, if there won't even be another Xbox console, if the battle for console supremacy is now solely between Sony and Nintendo. Thanks for watching.